Yo, have you heard of LinkedIn Learning? If you haven't, LinkedIn Learning is an American massive open online course provider. It provides video courses taught by industry experts in a variety of subjects. Now, why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because Living Corporate is in partnership with LinkedIn Learning to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion courses. Listen, if you're trying to be a better ally, you want to understand better diversity, equity, inclusion strategies, or you just want to learn how to be a better leader, you got to check out the courses on LinkedIn Learning. So check it out. You can do it one of two ways. You can click the link in the show notes, or you go to LinkedIn Learning and you search Living Corporate. Again, link in the show notes, or go to LinkedIn Learning and search Living Corporate. I'll see you over there.
Hey, hey, hey. Happy Saturday. Good morning and hello, everyone. Welcome to the new group chat, Radical Change with Vonda Page. I am your host, and I am so happy and excited today to have with me Dwana Franklin-Davis. Hello, CEO of Reboot Representation, and we're going to have an amazing conversation. Hopefully you can hear the tunes in the background. That is my daughter, Morgan Reese, her fourth single called Not Cool Anymore. It's out right now on iTunes, Spotify. You can check the video on YouTube. It's everywhere, Amazon. So, support and, check her out. I'm looking forward to today's conversation because we are going to get into some tech topics. And before we, really start getting into the key reason that I brought Dwana on today, let's talk about the tech news. So first, before we get into that, how are you doing in New York? How is the weather? How the week treat you so far?
Ooh, the week was a busy, crazy, intense week, both in life as well as what's happening in the world. But we all know that, right? I'm based in New York City, everyone down at the bottom of the island in the financial district. It's fully fall here now. The high today is in the upper 60s. So it's a nice fall day. Gives you that warm and cozy, let me put on my sweater kind of feel. So I love fall. Fall's my favorite season. So I appreciate a change of seasons because I like a change of fashion. So it's officially boot season out here.
Yes.
I love that. But we're good. It's been busy. I'm tired, but I am blessed and I'm thankful for all that has happened.
Well, that is great. And I'm so glad you're here. Most people know I am here in Portland, Oregon. And fortunately for us, we get to wear boots basically from September through May, because, it can rain at any point in time and we can get 40-degree shifts in weather. So right now it's 40 something. And I know when I woke up this morning, my house was 60 degrees. And I was like, I'm not turning on the heat because it's October, right? So who's going to turn on the heat in October? Not me, because I'm from the East Coast, but it'll probably swing up to 60 something, but it's 36, 37 now. So yeah, I had to go back and do the sweater thing. But this week with the news, the tech news specifically, the whole world is, going on, right? And we know all of that, but I'm laser focused on tech. You're focused on tech. And I want to talk about three things before we get into stuff. And the first thing I want to talk about is the really good news about the news about the no more non-disclosure agreements. So I am super excited about that. I was so happy about that, Jimmy Joint. I had to print it out.
You printed it.
I printed it out. I don't mess around. Okay. So let's talk about that for a second. So in case people have not heard about it, California legislative session that's currently in session passed Senate Bill number 331. And this bill, for those who may not be familiar with it, is all about settlement agreements. And a lot of people, especially those of us who have been in tech, who have worked in tech, especially in large corporations, you may have had to sign some sort of agreement they may have different names to them, but some sort of non-disclosure type agreement that says if you've worked at this company and you leave, you can't publicly talk about harassment or discrimination or anything like that. Well, this new law that the governor just approved on the 7th, is he basically said that now that's prohibited. So companies starting January of 2022 cannot tell an employee, even if you leave here, you can't disclose unlawful behavior or things like that. So I want to just take a few minutes and just talk about, so the culture of technology, right, is one of secrecy. And, there's been a whole bunch of conversations about Apple, right, trying to maintain this culture of secrecy and, looking for the leakers and all of this kind of stuff. And so I think that this legislation, it really has a big opportunity to do a lot of things as far as how harassment and discrimination and those charges are handled in companies. So give me your thoughts on that. Like, I was pumped. I was like, yes.
Yeah. So I think, there's a place for secrecy, right? I mean, all of these companies are built on who can get innovations out the fastest, right? And so they don't want that proprietary tech information leaking, which we can all respect, and we get that, right? If we have our companies, we also don't want the competitor to have that proprietary top secret thing that's going to make your thing amazing. So we get that, and that's a common sense. Yes, we get that. But when it comes to how people are treated, right? And when it comes to how you are the culture of the organization, why is that a secret? Why should the next person that comes into that organization not know that this potential future environment can be harmful to them? So there's been things that kind of have slowly been leaking, like Glassdoor. I mean, you can go on there and people put all the stuff on there about how they feel about the organizations. In summer of 2020, college students were posting which organizations canceled their internships when summer 2020 came. And so that became a whole thing, right? So I think that we are definitely in a culture of information, and how we use that information or how it's put out there is something that is critical and important. And that probably segues into one of your other hot topics of what's in the news. So I'll save that for a second. But I think this is great. We'll see what happens with how this maybe translates to the rest of the country. We all know California tends to be ahead of the curve. And in addition to that, Silicon Valley, that's where all the tech companies, many of the tech companies are. So they should be first. So let's see what this does. There's already that. One of my sayings is tech transcends industry. So we don't have to work for those giant companies to be part of tech anymore. Not even anymore. It was always a thing, but just changing our mindset.
Changing the mindset.
So people now have a choice. This helps with that choice. I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what it does.
Me too. And to your point, right, we've always had that choice, but it is about that mindset. And that's one of the things, that I think we all need to think about is, how do we transcend and change our mindsets to know that, if you want to work for a big name company, that's great. But you don't have to do that to still be able to succeed in tech, to still be a CIO, to still be an engineer, to still be a developer, a programmer, a designer, data analyst, data engineer. It doesn't matter. You can do all of that. But we have, bought into, my friend Farzine talked about the propaganda of it all, right? Is that, if you want to be in tech or you want to be successful, you have to have these names of these companies, on your resumes. But, the point around wanting to work in environments that are safe, that are productive, right? That are collaborative and that are healthy. And so if you can't, right, you can't say, well, hey, I worked at company X and, I made these reports or whatever because this happened and nothing happened. And then the next person goes in and the next person goes in there and the next person goes in there. Right. So, removing that veil of secrecy when it comes to how people are treated, that is key. I mean, of course, I don't think, in some instances, you might hear about companies stealing intellectual property, one little,
Right.
but that's not the thing that they're trying to hide, right? What they're trying to hide are public reports. What they're trying to hide is a conversation around treatment that people don't like, right? And the lack of accountability and or action around that treatment, right? And so
I think those two things are key, that accountability and that action. I think that especially in larger organizations, you're going to have both amazing leaders and managers and some that aren't so great. And so don't let those not so great leaders and managers ruin what the culture of that organization could be. So that accountability that you just said, how is the organization now responding to that leader or manager that has created this environment that doesn't represent the culture that the organization is trying to breed and foster, right? So instead, now if they allow that person, that individual, to continue to have that behavior, then yeah, absolutely, we should be able to say, and then that becomes, unfortunately, what that organization could represent, and that's not what anybody wants.
Absolutely. And it's funny because in the legislation, I mean, they talk about that there's a bunch of violations in terms of how companies are saying to people, if behavior is illegal, you're still not allowed to report it. And that literally makes no sense, right? And harassment, right, technically, legally is illegal, right?
Right.
And so I'm excited for people to know about it, to hear about it, and, to realize that there's a change coming. I mean, the change is happening, and this is a big piece of it. And I mean, I'm going to, have to do some research, but I'm curious as to how many, non-white male and non-male period technologists work in California altogether, because that'd be very interesting, right? Is it 2 million people? Is it 1.8 million? Whatever that number is, how many people have experienced harassment, or discrimination, being underpaid, underleveled, have reported discrimination that didn't get dealt with. So to your point around building and thinking about a culture that companies want, if you never get rid of the bad actors, then you maintain that culture. And in the law, they talk about information about unlawful acts, but the people not, the company not taking action, right? And so this is saying accountability is going to come, going to be part of it. So so that was super interesting to me. The other big thing that happened, I mean, it was so many big things. Like I have like 14 articles that I'm like writing stories about because it was so much this week. The other big thing, or one of the other big things, was the whistleblower, Facebook whistleblower. God bless this woman. I'm like, go girl, go woman, go get it, keep on talking. We need her so bad. I've been following Facebook since it was invented, and I only stayed on it maybe the first year and a half or so, 2 years, and I was like, oh, this ain't going to look good. I'm back on it now because of business, you need to be on it. But the whistleblower basically coming out and saying they knew all of these things. And I mean, it's so much, right? The stuff with the foreign governments and the vulnerabilities, right, that we know exist. All the other stuff that she's going to testify about, the insurrection, right, on January 6th. She's going to testify about other stuff. So the bottom line, the way I see it is, our policymakers, our government officials have never understood or given any parameters to big tech. And Facebook is out of control. They've been out of control. And literally, I think personally that the corruption and the systemic way that all of this is structured, we're still not going to see any accountability in a grand scheme. I think what we might see is some big people will get fired or leave voluntarily, but it doesn't matter because they're going with 8, 9 digits, right? They leaving with 8 and 9 digits, right?
True.
So,
Facts.
so it doesn't matter if people heads get rolled, people get fired, because if you leaving with 8, 9 digits, your life is fine. And when your skin is presenting as white and you're male, your life is fine anyway, right? So, I don't see a lot of accountability that's going to happen. But what will be super interesting is a couple of things. One, how people will start to think about these platforms and how much power they have and they wield. So, jump in on that part and just give me your thoughts.
I'm going to say something that might be controversial.
Say it. Radical. This is radical change. You can say what you want.
Yeah. So there are populations, there are people in our population that need to be protected, right? Our children. We need to protect our children because they don't yet know. They're learning and growing, and their minds are still formidable. So we got to do things to protect the children. Our elderly, we have to do things to protect the elderly. They did not grow up in this digital space. And so there are things that they are not as familiar with. But for the rest of us, I would like us to apply a little common sense. I'm going to call it common sense.
Critical thinking, common sense.
Yes. And so I'm not mad at Facebook. I mean, Facebook is doing what Facebook was meant to do. Facebook is making money. I have friends that work at Facebook, and make money. Make your money. I'm not mad at that. But there's a topic of how we receive information, right? And as individuals, we can be actors of that. And we know that all of this is money, revenue generating things. Not for us. I'm not making any money off of it, but it's that ad that pops up. So I saw something this week that blamed the marketers about how Facebook is reacting, because they're the ones that they're making money off of this, right? So when Facebook went down, marketers were like, I lost X number of dollars.
Billions. Right. Billions. People was pissed. Billions.
Right. So
they mad.
But so everybody's looking at Facebook as the bad actor and the bad guy in this. And Facebook is doing what they set out to do. Make money. So I mean, we have a choice. Why are we receiving our information and our news from Facebook anyway? Why? Can we start with that?
We can totally start with that. And they did a study, right, about how much, because we get so much news from Facebook, right? When the outage happened, they looked at how many people finally went to real news, right? As opposed to a curated feed that's based on things you talk about and algorithms based on what you say and stuff you follow. So to your point about taking accountability and responsibility, again, it shouldn't be, but I think that that's a radical concept for people, right? Because we have surrendered ourselves. Like, we have literally said to Google, Facebook, all of them.
All the big names.
Here you go. Microsoft, all of them. We said, here you go. I give you my name, my address, my phone number, my credit card.
Here's all the information about me.
My mother's maiden name, my address. Then I tell you everything I like.
Personal stuff. And let me also give you all of my images. But don't use them in a way that you're not supposed to use them. Right.
I mean, and so we have to take responsibility and we have to be smarter. And so, one of the other things that I want to do, right, is to make sure that people are informed and they have this information. So at the same time, the whistleblower, she came out, right? She talked about stuff. At the same exact time, there was a 1.6 billion person data breach, right? So we only have 300 and now 20 something million people in the United States, because we had 330, but people are dying, right? There's that. 1.6 billions people data. So that's way more than the population of the United States. That's like India and China and other countries. So we have all this data out there that we've freely given, right? And then when it gets sold or hacked or breached in some other way, they may or may not tell us about it, right? Because I don't know how many people even know that, right? How many people?
You can even stretch it past to those just give that swab of your DNA, and then we'll tell you about your ancestral history, which is fascinating. Some of us have done it. I have not. I'm an IT person, so I'm like, wait, what? You read the.
I didn't want to do it, but
I want to do it. I want to know. Of course, we want to know.
I wanted to know, and I finally did it 2 years ago, and
so
I didn't for years.
You sold your DNA to the people that now.
I did, and I won't say the name of the company or anything, but I did because I was dying to know.
Did you read the fine print? And now they have that access to information. They can do whatever they want with that information, and there's been already reports and studies about. People then them using that DNA for, I guess we can call this good if there's like a murder case and they want to do, and the person has in there. So that would be, I guess, a good thing. But then they use it and sell it to the drug companies. And now you're getting solicitations for these random drugs, prescription drugs or what. I mean, so there's good and bad with everything. But the point is that you have a choice on whether you want to give that information or not. Whether you want to, is the trade-off worth it to you? And as individuals, we have that choice. But again, I'm going to go back to, we got to protect the children because they don't know. Let's protect the elderly because they may not know. And then everybody else, it's a choice.
Yeah. It is. It's so much, and it has to. And with choices come responsibilities, right? And so I think the thing that's interesting about it also is, right, when you think about people who. I want to segue a little bit now into access, right? And then we can get into the other part of access. So when I think about one of the pieces that came up this week was around how executives, in Facebook and Instagram knew years ago, right, that the harm, right, that would be done to the teenage and adolescent brain, right, as they are, getting into social media and this and that. And me having a daughter that's 19 now, I remember it, a few years ago, I was like on it. I was taking that phone and looking through that phone and doing, and she was getting upset and mad, but I didn't care because as a parent, right, that's my job, right, to be doing it. So we have a whole set of circumstances and a whole thing that is available to people that have access, right? So this is a privileged group of people, right? Regardless of skin tone, regardless of economic or type of job, right? Then you have the rest of the world, right? The rest of the society and the communities that don't have broadband. My friend Alan Wong, who is the, executive director of Prairie STEM in Omaha, we had conversations about digital redlining. This week, we had another conversation about, there's different organizations trying to do the same thing. But then as soon as they get to these companies and say, hey, where's the support? Where's the champions? They won't be there. And so there's another issue with how access is controlled. Yes. And I believe that is another intentional thing, right? Because access to information, to real information, like the New York Times, like maybe, Associated Press, or like maybe Reuters or BBC or The Guardian, or I don't know, any kind of real newspaper, maybe Nation, I don't know, right? People can't get access to that stuff, right? And so we're continuing to grow a population of uninformed, uneducated people who don't know how to think, where critical thinking is not even part of what they're learning or what's in their makeup, right? Right. The messages that they're hearing are very targeted, right, and streamlined to what they need. And that's creating a bigger and bigger disparagement. Right. So I see this whole, equity and access thing across a whole spectrum from that tech is responsible for making worse, right? Because we know that they have plenty of money that we could have had internet, like electricity in this country.
Well, the problem is that it's monetized, right? And so how do we exactly that? So broadband should be standard like water. It like should water. Be, you get water that comes into your house. We need that to survive. We need that to thrive. We need clean water, right? So we had the thing with Flint, Michigan a few years back.
Flint is all over this country. We have Flint, Michigan's all Portland, Oregon has lead in water.
All over the country. New Jersey has lead in the water. I mean, there's places all over poor neighborhoods that have lead. So we deserve clean water. So we also deserve broadband. And I think that was also, that was not a secret, but there was a spotlight that was put on it at the height of the pandemic, because they were like, okay, let's get tablets or
Chromebooks they was giving kids.
Chromebooks to kids. All right, that Chromebook does no good if they don't have broadband access. It's a paperweight if there's no access to internet. So it still was not helpful. So I think that organizations are trying to do more, but they're still trying to not lose money. It's because we've monetized it. So how do we get past that? There were stories about, parents that hadn't paid their cable bills, and so they were holding hostage the internet access, and then the children couldn't be online learning. So that's an issue. That's a problem. That has to have some government regulation to figure out how that becomes as standard as clean water.
Absolutely. And I think about for me, right, that segues into the leadership and the decisions that are made within technology companies, because we know that the big companies, not just the tech companies, but the big companies, they're the ones who run our government, right? They're the ones who pay the politicians, who fund their campaigns and all of that, and they drive the decisions that the politicians make. How do all these politicians who their salary is $450,000 a year, they work for 5 years and they be a multimillionaire? Well, because they take in donations from all of these companies. So I look at it as like a giant ecosystem, right? The technology ecosystem. And part of it is the piece we were just talking about, right? Where the infrastructure that needs to happen in order to have free, wide scale, all around broadband access in the United States, that could have happened years ago. Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Google, any of them, right, could have worked with anybody else. Barclays, Wells Fargo, they could have, anybody, Mr. Bezos, any of them, they could have made this happen years ago. They could be working on it now. Our government could say, if you have this much market share, you have this, right? The number one search on Bing is Google. So if you have this much market share, this much influence, this much whatever, you have some responsibility to the populace, to the citizenry, right? So right. I think that and I'm not blaming it on the politicians, I'm not blaming it on companies, but the solution, in my view, it lies within holding the tech companies accountable to do the right thing. And I think that only can happen when leadership shifts, which is why the main reason that I wanted to talk to you is about reboot representation. Because in my view, because I've been in technology 30 something years, I know that women will make different decisions in leadership. I know, I could tell you as CEO now of my own company, even though I only have 4 people, right? But I know that if any person ever got accused of sexually harassing a person, touching a person, inappropriate word out their mouth, we're going to have a talk. You can either make it right and we get it fixed, or you out the door. But in these bigger companies, right, to the point earlier about the culture, right? The culture is what the leaders make it. But I think if we had a culture where 50% of the leadership were women and people were look like the population of human beings that exist, that same stuff wouldn't happen. Just like I believe if women had half of all the leadership positions, we wouldn't have all this exploitation of children and women. We wouldn't have it. We wouldn't be fighting for the right to vote still, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the equal rights, right? For women. We wouldn't be fighting for equal pay, right? So let's talk about inside of tech, what is going on and what stuff needs to happen, because it needs to happen.
There's a lot that needs to happen. I mean, one of the key things that you just said is that if insert company there, if the organization reflected the population and the community that they serve, it would have a different feel and culture, and different decisions would be made. To go back to what you said about government, right? What if our organizations disclosed to their employee base how they were supporting political decisions? Some organizations have a pact, and some individuals have that choice to, to be able to donate to that. But do you have the right? Are they also telling you these are the political things that we're supporting? These are the views. We saw a little bit of that with January 6th and how we saw some companies pull out because of that. And I think that was the first. There were probably 10 companies that were like, we're going to pause on this. And it was very visible and very public. But outside of that, do we have visibility to the company that you work for? How are they supporting politicians and influencing legislation? So that would be my first. Let's see if you can make that happen as an individual. If you're going to give to that PAC, then you should know how that money is being donated, how it's being, how it's influencing direction and change. That would be my first call. And then, so reboot representation. Let's talk about that for a bit. I am celebrating my 2-year anniversary this month. 2 years being CEO of Reboot Representation. And I am so honored and thrilled to be the one leading this charge and this cause. And our mission, for those that are not familiar with us, we are a coalition of amazing companies that have come together to double the number of Black, Latina, and Native American women graduating with computing degrees by 2025. Yes. But the reason why we even exist. So let's go to that. There was a survey that was done of amazing, air quotes around that, leading companies, and those organizations represented about $500 billion in revenue. 500 million in philanthropic giving. And we wanted to understand what they were doing with that philanthropic giving. Because in the media, this is 2017 now, the media, there was lots of stories about, hey, news, these companies are investing in women. And so back then it was just women. The world has shifted. Do we focus on people of color or do we focus on women? And it shifted to focusing on women. So we're focusing on women. We need more women in tech. So okay, it says you're investing in women in tech. Let's see. So 500 million in collective philanthropic giving. Those companies were only spending 5% of that money on women and girls in tech. 5%. That's it. And it gets worse. Those organizations were spending 0.1% on Black, Latina, and Native American women and girls in tech. So
pause.
No, let me give you the full number. Let me give you the number. So 500 million in philanthropic giving from 32 companies. 0.1% of that is only 335K on Black, Latina, and Native American women and girls. That's it. And so you have all these organizations that are like, we're investing, we can't find them, we don't know. And then their philanthropic giving was not matching. So yes, that number is pause worthy because you can say they were spending nothing on it, but they all wanted to complain that there was no, we don't know where they are, we can't find them, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition to that, the pipeline really was shrinking. So there's those who are going to argue that there's no pipeline issue. Yes, there is. You can look at the public data, IPEDS numbers, which is anybody can search through. It's a pain, but you can search through it. And for 2017 numbers, when we were looking at all the reports, trying to understand who's graduating with computing degrees. We know that computing and tech is the future. Who's graduating? And 4% of that graduating population were Black, Latina, and Native American women. That's
combined.
Combined, 4%. And that number was down by about 40% over the previous decade. The numbers show it was steadily decreasing. And that number wasn't projected to double to 8% until the year 2052 without interventions. So that's why Reboot exists. So Reboot exists to help solve for that very specific portion of the pipeline of Black, Latina, and Native American women. So and again, I'm going to be very specific. That's our target population. There are other populations that are also underrepresented in tech, but that BLNA, as we say for short, BLNA women are the least represented in tech. And so there's a saying that many of you probably have heard, rising tides raise all ships. So we're going to focus on the least represented in the population. And that's going to raise and elevate everyone. So reboot representation. Companies, tech companies who are like, yes, we should do more, be better. We have a ways to go. They have joined the coalition at various tiered levels. And then my team, we align and partner with nonprofits, and that can include higher ed institutions. And we invest in programs and initiatives that are in alignment with our mission, which again is to double the number of BLNA graduating with computing degrees by 2025. So we're here to fund underfunded organizations that are going to make a wide impact across the country. We're not focused outside of the U.S. We're very U.S. focused. Many of our companies are global companies, but they also recognize this need within the U.S. So that's why we exist. I'm happy to say that the numbers are increasing. So this is year 3 of the coalition. And we can look at the data, the numbers are increasing. However, that percentage is not increasing. So what that means is not just BLNA women and girls are like, ooh, there's this thing over here called tech. I should look at that, which we need and we want. But other people are also like, ooh, tech is definitely the future. Let me go over here and make sure that I'm part of that. So we need more of that for our Black and Brown communities so that they can have an active part in the future. Not just for jobs, because we know jobs are important and that we know that there are many ways into tech. So with boot camps and apprenticeships, there's no one pathway into tech. With Reboot, we're also trying to set up those baseline credentials of that baccalaureate degree so that they can also be those future leaders. And if they choose to be in corporate America, they can have the opportunity to rise into those leadership roles or go on and be entrepreneurs. But when they look at that resume, you've got that check mark credential. And we need them to go on and get master's degrees and go back and get PhDs, because there's also a deficit of Black and Brown women doing those things. And we need to go back and be educators and guidance counselors, because we need to see ourselves in all these places and help influence that next generation of amazing Black and Brown people so that they are not left out of the future.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's funny because I have had so many conversations with really young, we call them recent college graduates or, who have said they in their entire time in undergrad, they never had a Black CIS professor, or, in any of the sciences at all. Yeah. I've met people, because I'm from the East Coast originally, but I've been on the West Coast for 7 years now. But I've met people on the West Coast. They never had any Black teachers like ever in their life, and it's super interesting because seeing yourself is one piece of representation. But then, when I think about the experiences that I've had young women tell me about being in an engineering class or another class, and how it's the same experience that we have in the corporate world, right? It's when you're the only. Right?
I went to a majority institution for undergrad and I majored in computer science.
Okay.
And in my freshman class, there were 3 Black people, myself and 2 Black men in my freshman class. And at the end of freshman year, I was the only one standing. By my junior year, I decided to change my major. Not because I couldn't do computer science, but because I looked around and I was like, I do not want to do this. I don't want to. I had that image of, sitting in a dark room and doing all the coding. And then I'm looking at these people that I'm sitting around and I'm like, I do not want to be stuck with these people for the rest of my life. And so I changed my major to business because I was like, they're having fun in the business school. It looks more inclusive over there.
Yeah.
I can make more of a change and be more of myself over there. So my junior year, I changed my major. But thankfully, that change in major for me was not a change out of technology and a change out of my career path, which I really do love. So I want the young folks that come behind us to be able to see themselves in this space. Mm-hmm. It's not just the traditional white dude with a hoodie that is in tech, right? And that's leading tech. It's also the Black woman with the fro that can lead tech. It's also the amazing woman with the hijab that is leading tech. Tech is everything, and it's for everyone. One of the things I tell young people is take your passions and marry it with tech, and you will change the future, because tech transcends industry, and there's a place for all of us to be part of it. So I think that there's so much that we can do. And I briefly saw a comment about mentoring. So I'm going to quickly plug my mentoring program.
Yes, please.
Yes. So Reboot Representation, we're evolving as we are continuing to grow. We have 14 grantee partners right now. And in the beginning, when our companies joined, it was that financial support. They were giving. And that was a great, yes, we need all the money. Give more money. We can use absolutely more money. That's baseline check mark. But we need more than money. We need visible representation. And so many of the programs that we partner with have mentoring, but the gap that we saw was that Black, Latina, Native American women in college did not have mentors that looked like them in industry. Mm-hmm, and so with our mentoring program that is just now launching, we are trying to fill that void and that gap. So for our corporate partners, if you are at any of our corporate partners, and you're a Black, Latina, Native American woman, I need you to sign up for our mentoring program. And we are going to match you with Black, Latina, and Native American women that are in undergrad. They need to see you, they need to hear you, and they need your support.
I love that. I mean, I think about that all the time. And I've done a couple talks on mentoring and sponsorship. And I started mentoring at a really young age. I actually started mentoring when I was in high school. I mentored middle school kids and high school kids. And then it continued. And even when I went to college, we had programs with schools. I went to Temple, and we had programs with schools in North Philly. And we would, we like sponsored a whole school or a class in a school. Like a bunch of people had a school, and you might have, we like 8 people might have one class or whatever. So I've gotten into the habit of it because it's really, really important, because there's literally no way, right? A new young person, especially woman, especially Black, Brown, Latina in tech, trying to navigate that and trying to figure it out after, already having probably traumatic experiences if they did go to a predominantly white institution for college, right? And if they major in computers, oh my goodness, right? Or any of the STEM topics, they are usually filled with males, right? And so, you telling me that 3 in the whole class and only 1 woman, that's just, and so when you then move that same experience into the workplace and you don't see yourself, right? And it even makes it more dynamic, right? Because not only do you not have the opportunity to collaborate and partner and work with other people that you have things in common, you're like the outsider because you're the only, right? And anything you say and do, all the old stuff that we don't even have to get into, but the whole thing, you either representing the whole race, you're angry, you have an attitude, this, that, like whatever all the thes are, that stays. And so it gets more and more difficult the fewer resources and people and support system that you have. So it's definitely critical. And I think, mentoring as young and as early as possible. And people can start that journey early, right? If a person is in high school, they can mentor their own sibling or a neighbor or a cousin, right? And keep it going. So I think that's huge, and that's a really big deal. I'm looking. I want to hit to some of the comments. One of the things I'm thinking about, is how are you helping companies understand that it's it's not that there's a lack of people or that there is a lack of skills, right, that Black and brown people have, One thing I know that a lot of tech companies do is they go to specific pools, right? So they are specifically looking at, the Ivies and Stanford and MIT, right? Or, a couple others, maybe Caltech or whatever. But what about all the HBCUs? What about the state schools? What about the programs like, Year Up and others, right, that are training, all those coding programs that are training people in the skills, right? Because there's even levels where we're shut out from an academic standpoint, right? And being in high school.
You said so much with that. Let me jump in. There's a few key points that I want to highlight. So companies need to branch out of those standard big schools that they tend to go to. And I am proud to say that many of the companies that I work with are doing that now. And so they are going to the state schools to recruit, which is great, right? We know that state schools are more diverse. They are partnering more with HBCUs. They are partnering more with community colleges. They are partnering more with those apprenticeships. I said earlier that there are many pathways into tech. It's not just through the bachelor's degree, right? We can get amazing talent from community colleges, from apprenticeships, from boot camps with certificates, things like that. Those people are going to be amazing value adds to any organization. Here's my beef with all of this. I want a plan. I want these organizations that have done a great job of now recruiting from non-standard places to also have a plan to continue to develop this amazing talent. In 5 years, when we're looking at amazing diversity numbers, I do not want to see all of the Black and brown people in the bottom rung of the organization. I don't. So that's the next thing, right? We've got 30% more Black people, but they're all in the bottom of the organization. I do not want to see that. So what then, once we get people in the door, how are they able to continue to learn, evolve, and grow in that company if that's what they choose to do? Some companies are doing a great job with regards to tuition reimbursement, where people can then go back to school and higher ed and get bachelor's degrees if that's what they choose. But I think we are not there yet. And so I want to continue to have that be top of mind for companies that are doing it right or doing something different. So that's first. Second, I love the partnerships with HBCUs. We love our HBCUs. They produce amazing Black talent. We know that. So shout out to all the HBCUs. However, this is the controversial part. Black women are not graduating from HBCUs in computing. I've got, again, public data charts and looking at where Black women are graduating from computing, and majority Black women that graduate from computing are going to majority serving institutions. Mm-hmm. So my fear is that when you have said company that's like, I partnered with this HBCU to get my Black talent, and that's not a significant place where Black women are graduating from computing, and then they try to put them in these roles that maybe they're not prepared for or ready for, or they put them into other roles that are less technical. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just say like a project management role. There's nothing wrong with project management, but that does not have as much earning potential as those technical roles. So I don't want them to be like, let's steer them here into this lesser path, unless that's what the woman chooses to do. But company, don't go there, be disappointed and say, I tried to partner with the school and then they didn't produce the talent that I needed. So we wrote actually a couple of blogs on what companies could and should and need to be doing. I've got a blog series called Dear Tech Companies, comes out every other month, and we give them not just this is what you're doing wrong, but also the actionable tips on what they're supposed to be doing right, different things they need to consider. So and also recently, we just published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review 2 case studies from 2 of our corporate partners on different ways of doing things that are going well. One of which I'm going to call out one of our companies, Dell, does an amazing job of partnering with HBCUs and also recruiting non-standard or untraditional backgrounds or majors, and because they looked at their their job descriptions and their job functions. And they were saying, do we really need a 4-year degree for this? Guess not. Or what is a high growth area? And so they were like, we have this whole department over here where you don't need a degree and you can be really successful and you can make a whole lot of money. So let's shift and figure out how we can recruit more people here. And so we need more companies to look at those job functions and be with a critical eye and say, do we really have these requirements as an accurate reflection of what we need?
Mm-hmm.
So a couple things: recruit from non-standard different places, then figure out how you can elevate people in the organization. What are those plans? Because it's not enough to just recruit diverse talent. Mm-hmm. You have to also work to retain and promote the talent that you have. It does no good to recruit X number of people when you got the same number of people walking out the back door. That's a waste of your investment. It's more expensive on the company. So there should be programs and initiatives to develop and foster the talent that you have. So what does that look like and what does that mean? And then what does partnership look like with Hispanic Serving Institutions, HBCUs, tribal colleges and universities? Let's really invest in those institutions and have a real partnership. Don't just say, hey, let me give you this random technology. And then that instructor has to figure out how they're going to have time to develop the curriculum around it. And, oh, by the way, they may not have the infrastructure for it. Man, that's not even what they need. What they need is that insert thing here. Ask that institution what they need. Don't assume. And then be a real partner so that you can create that real pathway from that organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so, so many things came up as you were talking about that. I mean, so first I'm thinking about the large tech companies that have large customer service operations, and they may have centers, customer ops centers in different, not random, but strategic, right, locations. Right. And what they'll do is they'll have in the customer service area of these big companies, that's where you mostly have the Black and the brown, right? Indigenous, if any, right? Women, in those roles. And then they get stuck in those categories, right? In those jobs, even when they have different degrees. So to your point about, McKinsey does it every year, the Lean In study, right? And they talk about that bottom rung and how many start there, and you go up and up, and hardly anyone makes it. The point that I thought, that's a Black or a brown person or woman. The point that I thought was really interesting as you were talking, and I was thinking about, if Black women aren't getting CIS or other STEM degrees from HBCUs, and they're getting them from the PWIs, then that means they're in the same exact candidate pool as white guy with the hoodie, right? And so if I'm the hiring manager and I'm a white guy who was wearing a hoodie 15 years ago, I'm gonna hire the person that looked just like I looked 15 years ago.
That's what
I'm not gonna hire this Black person who I don't even know anything about. I didn't even know Black people did technology or whatever they believe, right? Because they don't ever see us. So we really have to put a sincere focus in, right, on supporting it. So let's talk about, that we can get into some of the chat, because Dawn and Eric and everybody, we having a lot of good conversation in here, talking specifically about, the non-traditional places to get talent, right? And when you think about technology, I see it as being much more accessible for everybody to be able to use, right? And take advantage of, if we had the right infrastructure, of course, because of the portability of it, right? As opposed to, like, I think about, like some of the trades where you can't just do it, like I had my house painted. That's a thing you have to go out and do, right? But if you have some sort of tablet, some sort of device, right, there's other things that you can do to help people on board to technology and learn technology. And so having those those resources and those systems and that bigger way of thinking about it, I think is critical. What are some of, in addition to, the people talking about the sources of where to get these, these candidates, and the other issue around once they get into the environment, right, and get into the company, if they are the only, what are the challenges that the companies are saying that they're having, right, with the retainment piece of it? I'm curious about that part.
I don't know that or the companies are there yet,
Okay.
right? So there's a couple things. I'm big on data. And so whether we're talking about programs that we're investing in, or we're talking about these major corporations, the first thing is we can't create any programs or initiatives without understanding the data. So we need to, one, collect the data. Mm-hmm. Two, it needs to be disaggregated by race and gender at the very least. And so let me just break that down for those that haven't seen it. So sometimes when you say you look at a program and have a visual and you say how many men and how many women, and you may say, okay, I've got 30% women and I've got 70% men. And so we need to work on women, which is what's happening, right? We need to work on women. Let's get 50-50 women, right? And so that looks like, all right, what does that look like? And so then another way to break that down is let's break that down by race. And if you say, okay, we have 40% Asian and 40% white, and the remaining is all the other stuff. Mm-hmm. All the other races. Okay, so we know that we have predominantly white and Asian people. This is not a secret, in tech especially.
Nope.
And then, everybody else falls in the middle. So, you may look at that and be like, all right, so the main thing we need to work on when you look at these two charts separately is we should probably focus on women, which is what happened for a very long time. But when you start really breaking down that data and you look and you say, wow, we only have, when you look at that 30% of women, and the majority of those women are white and Asian, and mm-hmm. it's even fewer everybody else. So how do we really design programs and initiatives? How do we know what we're investing in? How do we know what we're solving for if we don't truly understand the data? And so by minimum, disaggregated by race and gender. And then if we're talking about our corporate partners, let's also break that down by job function and level. So then we can see, all the Black women are at the bottom of the organization. All the Black women are the admins in our company. Mm-hmm. You walk in and you see the receptionist, she's Black, and she counts in the numbers. But so let's also break this down by job function, level, race, and gender so that we can say this is what we need to solve for. Are we doing this with our candidate slates? So we know when we are interviewing for jobs, what our candidate slates look like. Is that actually diverse? Do you have, I hear organizations saying, well, we can't move forward with the candidate slate unless we have at least 2 women that are interviewed. Okay, well, you've just interviewed a bunch of white dudes and a white and an Asian woman.
Right.
So that was a first step, but that's not good enough. So we need to get better with that. And then here's the thing, exit interviews. Are we doing exit interviews at all? Are you doing it? Some are. But then what are you doing with that information? And how are you determining, especially as we, over the last 18 months, we've heard about this term, the she session, right? With women leaving mm-hmm. the workforce at a ridiculous rate. And so even before the she session, do we actually understand why people are leaving? And do we actually understand, how we can possibly retain them? And now that we're talking about remote work and hybrid work, do you know what your employees need and want? And it's going to vary by industry. It's going to vary by corporate culture. It's going to vary by location in the country, right? So some person that was commuting 2 hours one way is going to, maybe during the pandemic, is like, I don't want to commute 4 hours a day. I want to spend that time with my family. I'm going to not do this job anymore. Or those of us that live in large cities where we don't necessarily have that crazy commute, but it's that those amenities, like for me, I've got little kids. I can't work in my apartment. You would see a little head right here, right now, if I was at home working from my apartment. So do you really understand what your employees need? Are we taking those surveys? Is it different for the Black woman as compared to the Latina, as compared to the Asian woman, as compared to the white woman? Women are not a monolith. So understand what your employees need so that you can provide the services to both recruit and retain the people that you want to foster and develop.
Absolutely. And we know, right, not only because of the great resignation, but because of the number of especially Black and brown women that are, spinning up startups, you know what I mean? Because if you have been in a particular industry or field, for decades, right? And you get to a point where you're like, things aren't progressing, your career isn't progressing the way you want to, you can make decisions. You talked earlier, right? We talked about choices, right? Making choices to, to manage your own career, right? But I mean, the entire thing, right? When we think about the even larger goals, right, for society, the larger goals that we have for equity, larger goals we have for inclusion, for change, to rise all of the ships, right? So that we can all do better. I was thinking last night, I guess because it's so many things, think about my Baptist church upbringing, right? And I was just remembering, the least person among us, right? The more we care for the person who has the least or the person at the bottom, that is going to be the thing that we need to do and focus on. And, this is another area where we have to continue to drive radical change. Reboot representation is making moves and trying to make stuff happen. That goal about, the increase by 2025, how's that coming along? Are you feeling good about that? And then, to close us out, what can those of us who are listening, those who are, who want to support these efforts, what should we be doing?
Great question. So one, Reboot, we're doing well with regards to the numbers. The numbers of BLNA women are increasing with regards to going into and graduating with tech degrees, but it's not enough.
Okay.
The percentage and the proportion is not increasing, although the numbers are increasing. So I don't want to just say, check, we're making this goal. I still want more. So I want a lot. So one, what can people do? It depends. What is recognizing your place of privilege and how you can influence or help the situation? Mm-hmm. We all have a place of privilege. So for myself, what does that mean? We're going to be leaders. We're going to be mentors. We're going to be coaches. We're going to be sponsors. How are we bringing that next generation along? How are we bringing our coworkers and our peers and supporting each other along? And, I can have probably a whole other session on what that means and what that looks like. So think about ways that you can influence and use your place of privilege to help someone else. Two, we need that. I'm going to go back to that data. If you're a decision maker or you're one that is into the data, whether we're talking about investing in programs, whether we're talking about that hiring slate, exit interviews, or that profile within the organization, we don't know what we're solving for unless you have a real baseline of data. So collect the data disaggregated by race, gender at the least. And then for our individuals can't call themselves allies. You don't get to
Nope.
I'm an ally. No, you don't get to call yourself an ally. It's you're out being an ally for those out there that are not in a minority status. That's something that somebody else gets to call you an ally. So look at how you can do things different, whether you're talking about empathy. That's huge. We need to have more empathy, try to understand somebody else's situation or where they're coming from, which requires a little bit of communication. So how are we communicating differently? Are you a leader or a manager? Does your team feel comfortable to bring their full selves to work? I always tell, you hear, you should be able to bring your full self to work. Which I am my full self all the time. So I don't know how not to be. It's too much work not to be. But there's a lot of people that feel that they can't. And so workplace, are you creating and fostering an environment where individuals can bring their full selves to work? We got to create that infrastructure in that place so people can say, I can be me.
Absolutely.
And so how are we able to do that? I think employee resource groups inside of a corporation are huge. That is that place where us as individuals can contribute and have sense of community. During the pandemic, corporations that had strong employee resource groups, those groups were helping to hold the culture of the organization together, which is amazing. But hey, leaders, let's not just rely on these resource groups to hold the culture together. Let's compensate these leaders of the employee resource groups in some way, right? Because they are doing this extra volunteer job outside of their day job, outside of what they get paid for, holding your culture together. So how are we compensating them for that? Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of I can talk a whole couple other hours.
But we can talk and we can get back on and we can talk more stuff. I loved it. I'm like, man, it's after time, but it went so well. I have to thank you again. I mean, and these conversations are important and I'm going to keep on having them. There's no controversy. I think the only controversy is in silence, right? Is not bringing these things to the forefront. And we have, kept our heads down and low for too long, right? And it's time to do what we need to do so that we can, get to that point. So I want to say thank you, Dwana. I want to say thank you to Dawn and everybody who joined today. Those of you who are going to watch us on the replay, you can catch that. But just stay tuned for the group chat, and I will be back on Saturdays, and we'll definitely have you back on, Dwana. Thank you once again. So happy Saturday, and thanks, everybody.
Saturday.
All right. Bye.